Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to News 9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi, and over the next couple of minutes, India's agenda at the ASEAN Summit is going to be our key focus, because today we're diving into Prime Minister Narendra Modi's packed agenda for the next few days as he embarks on a diplomatic journey that includes the G20 Summit, a crucial bilateral meeting with the United States President Joe Biden, and of course, ahead of that, the highly anticipated ASEAN Summit in Indonesia. Now, what's India's link with the ASEAN? Let's just take a look at that as well. While India is not a member country of ASEAN, it has ties with the bloc, from being a regional dialogue partner in 1992 to a comprehensive strategic partnership that was unveiled and started by the Prime Minister in 2022, only last year. It was essentially propelled by Prime Minister Modi's Act East policy, which has been the Prime Minister's focus over the last couple of years as well. In 2018, ASEAN leaders were also the chief guests at India's Republic Day parade. India has also signed a free trade agreement with ASEAN in 2010, something that is being looked at a revision when it comes to the Prime Minister's trip to Jakarta in Indonesia. Now, notably, India also had individual ties with these member countries, which has made India a strong player amid these Southeast Asian nations. Now, Prime Minister Modi is attending the ASEAN Summit in Jakarta on the invitation of Indonesian President Joko Widodo. The Southeast Asian bloc has 10 member countries. This year's meeting is going to focus primarily on China's growing presence in the region and the Myanmar crisis after the coup. But why is this grouping important, and what is India essentially going to bring to the table? So let's unravel India's deepening connections with ASEAN from its humble beginnings as a regional dialogue partner in 1992 to the recent comprehensive strategic partnership, all driven by Prime Minister Modi's Act East policy. Stay tuned, get down in the comment sections as we explore with the right kind of panelists and experts with us on the broadcast, foreign affairs expert, and of course a former diplomat with us on the broadcast as well. Stay tuned as we explore the significance of India's role in this influential summit, where discussions will revolve around China's regional influence and the ongoing Myanmar crisis. Well, if you want to sound like an ASEAN expert, we've got you covered. We have the right kind of panelists with us on the show. Let me just introduce you to them. Ambassador Deepak Vohra, former Indian diplomat, with us on the show. He's been coming to shows on News9 for the longest time. Good afternoon to you, sir. And also with us is Rabinder Sachdev, foreign affairs expert. Very warm welcome to you, sir, as well. Gentlemen, do stay on with me. I have a couple of reactions coming from the Ministry of External Affairs, Saurabh Kumar, and let's first listen to how the Ministry of External Affairs is putting the Prime Minister's ASEAN trip, and then we'll come back for more.
Yeah, you have rightly pointed out that Honorable Prime Minister of India is coming here, despite of G20 Summit just after one day. It's like on 7th of September, Honorable Prime Minister is coming here. That shows the kind of importance which we give to this region. Now, when we talk about Act East policy, of course, as you know that in early 90s we had Look East policy. Then Honorable Prime Minister of India, in 2014 gave us Act East policy. Then again it evolved into Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. It became more comprehensive. And in that ASEAN, we always say that we always give importance to ASEAN centrality. And when we say ASEAN centrality, which means it's it's complex of many things. It's about connectivity, it's about trade, it's about investment, it's about people-to-people contact.
Well, all right, we're going to keep playing those reactions, but let's get the ball rolling. Rabinder Sachdev, I'm going to first come to you, sir. How are you looking at the key objectives and the priorities of India? Because ASEAN has its own priorities. They're going to be talking about Myanmar. They're going to be talking about China's, growing presence in the South China Sea is going to be another hot topic. Our country's key objectives and priorities, what are we essentially putting there on the table? It's going to be a quick in and out, but the Prime Minister is going to make sure that even in that quick in and out, what he wants to do, what he's set out to do, he's going to make sure he achieves that.
Thank you so much, Kabir. It's a pleasure to be with you and Ambassador Vohra. I think in the big picture, what India looks forward to with ASEAN is, deepening linkages, deeper linkages, essentially, big picture, especially on trade. That is one. ASEAN, if you look, the collective GDP of the ASEAN countries is about the same as the GDP of India. I would think around $3.5 to $3.75 trillion. So that's a big economic, block, so to say. So deeper trade linkages, along with it comes the fact that the deeper we get, engaged with ASEAN, the less ASEAN kind of is dependent, is intertwined with China. So there is definitely a geopolitical perspective to this relationship also, equally along with trade. And the third piece is, I think, overall maritime security and our maritime outreach also with these countries. So I think probably these are two, three big, items for us. Also, again, with respect to China, ASEAN wants to keep, or supposedly aspires to keep itself as, let's say, neutral or independent as a bloc, under pressure from the US on the one side and under pressure from China on the other side. So our objective would be, I think, the deeper we engage with ASEAN, the more we are able to help it stay, if not independent, but stay, less under pressure from China. So we kind of bolster up ASEAN's neutrality the deeper we get into economic engagements with ASEAN.
Right, and Ambassador Vora, at the same time, echoing from where Rabinder Sachdev left us, essentially, it seems like this trade deal that we have with ASEAN, that's something that is being looked at for a revision as well. What do you think is going to happen? How will this impact trade ties with the ASEAN nations?
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure, sir, to be on TV9 Digital, and I see that you have Mr. Sachdev. I respect him greatly, learn from him always. His intellect is far superior to mine, so is yours. Well, let me just begin by saying that I'm in New York at the moment. It's 0240 in the morning, and it's 17 degrees Celsius outside. So that is Mausam ka hal. Now, as far as ASEAN is concerned, so I've served in 2 ASEAN countries. I was in Malaysia in the mid-90s, and prior to that in Vietnam, which initially was an enemy of ASEAN, but then later, along with Cambodia and Laos and Myanmar, became members of ASEAN. As Mr. Sachdeva has pointed out, and as you have said, ASEAN plays a very central role in our Act East policy, as well as in our commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. I'm not even going to talk about the civilizational bond that transcends culture, religion, language, ethnicity, and binds India to ASEAN. He's going to Jakarta just for a day, and I'm told that Indonesia is also adjusting the schedule so that the Prime Minister can rush back for the G20 Summit.
Right.
What does one make of this? One, that India's presence adds gravitas to any international or regional forum. Take it or leave it, like it or don't like it. That is the reality today. Second, that the fact that the Prime Minister is rushing there demonstrates India's commitment to its Act East policy. Third, and this is extremely important, I believe, neither the United States nor China is seen as a reliable partner. India is. The India-ASEAN Summit is the first since the relationship was elevated to a comprehensive strategic partnership in 2022. These upgraded ties signify much greater cooperation across various sectors, from trade to security, especially maritime security. And the theme for this summit this time, sir, is ASEAN Matters, epicentrum of growth. I was in Malaysia when we were a sectoral partner, and I can assure you that it wasn't easy for us to become a full dialogue partner. There were a lot of pressures on us in the mid-1990s. Our economy wasn't doing well. There was China on the one side. There was lots of things, and it was tough for us to get the invitation. Singapore stood by us, pushed our case. But then slowly, as we grew in strength, our economy grew, our defense power grew, as our international role began to increase, ASEAN realized that they needed India. At one point, you might recall that India was asked to join ASEAN when ASEAN was formed. We did not. So things have changed. Much water has flowed under the bridge. And that Indonesia, which was the host last year at Bali, has asked us to come. It is very, very significant. Sir, what it says is that as far as Asia is concerned, as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, the Indian Ocean is India as the Pacific, the United States and others will take care of. But India has arrived and ASEAN recognizes this.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no doubt in the fact that India's rising stature in the global south, in the Pacific South, is something that is making, eyeballs and heads turn everywhere. But, you spoke about maritime security. I'm going to take this next question to Mr. Sachdev. Help the viewers understand a little bit. When we're looking at maritime security and Prime Minister's Act East policy, there's clear focus on ASEAN, but at the same time, the recent map that was released by China, the standard map, a lot of ASEAN nations have, shown their disappointment. They've shown their dissent. They've expressed their dissent over that as well. So there seems to be like a two-pronged sword over here. On the one hand, you're trying to focus on the Act East policy, and on the other hand, you've had these map-based incursions, these absurd claims, what Jaishankar calls it. How are you looking at those developments, sir?
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if we were to, let's say, decode or try and decode what do we mean by maritime security, right, in a big picture, there are a couple of things to that. One is, of course, the fact that conflicts over your sea over your, sea waters, conflicts relating to that. So that's one big issue. And as you mentioned, 4 of these countries, or maybe more, I think, including Brunei, Malaysia, are, very much disturbed by China's claims as to where China's territory extends to. The basic point being that, you see, any country, from your coast, if you're sitting on the sea, from your coast, 12 nautical miles is your territory in the sea. Nobody can come in that. If anybody comes, you shoot, right? But beyond 12 nautical miles, up to 200 nautical miles from your coast is the zone which is your exclusive economic zones. What this means is that up to 200 nautical miles from my coast, other nations' ships can come and go, etc. But no one can exploit the resources of the oceans in this economic zone. Now, what China does by, its 9-dash line of claiming, the islands which extend further, etc.
Right.
So what China does, it impinges upon the exclusive economic zones of several of these countries. So that is a matter of national security of these countries. That's one big area. The other area in maritime security is also actually, piracy. And sea pirates, and especially in this region, there have been now a bit less, but there have been cases of piracy or pirates, disturbing the naval or even commercial ships, similar to what's happening on the east coast of Africa at times. So these are broadly, you would say, 2 aspects of maritime security which concern everybody. And the third is, of course, China again. Again related to China, this topic comes up that the Chinese fishermen come into the exclusive naval zones, do fishing. Chinese ships or warships transit through. And if my country, let's say if it's Vietnam, my ships are there, the Chinese ships are challenging me. Philippines is a great example, some islands which Philippines owns and claims as its territory, which including the UN, the Convention of the Seas, the Law of Seas, has also agreed that belong to Philippines, but China disagrees. So these are disputes which are out there. Now, with respect to our look east policy, therefore, yes, when we look east, we want to have strong, stable partners. By the way, our trade with ASEAN as a bloc is around $90 billion, whereas ASEAN's trade with China is almost $1 trillion. So ASEAN-China trade is about 10 times compared to what India-ASEAN trade is. So we need to bump it up. The point being that the more you have, once again, I'm coming back to this idea of engagements, the deeper and wider engagements we have in our Look East policy, the better it is for us in terms of trade, of course. But the more, the better it is also for us to build up a counter, a counter vector to Chinese expansion and China's claims, illegal claims on the, not the territories, on the seas or exclusive economic zones which belong to several of these ASEAN nations. Now, the ASEAN nations are kind of, in a little bit of a fix. They want to, in fact, the Indonesians have said that the core tagline this time is that let us have unity and let us not be a proxy to anyone. Okay, that's what ASEAN is saying under Indonesia's chair this time, that let us have unity amongst ASEAN nations and let us not become a proxy to the wars of others, which implies, of course, America-China tensions. So ASEAN in that sense is walking a tightrope. And to some extent, even India is exactly doing the same. We are one, we are charting our own path. We do not want to be a proxy to anyone else. So we want to be not a proxy to anyone else. ASEAN does not want also to be a proxy to anyone else. So therefore, there is a natural alignment of interest for increasing, enhancing cooperation in multiple domains between India and the ASEAN nations. And lastly, as Ambassador Vora said, or he said that we'll keep it aside for the time being, the element of overall cultural and soft links, right? So that is definitely a huge bedrock, but even keeping that apart, there is a natural alignment of our, one, trade we need, they need, everyone needs trade, right? But by boosting trade, by boosting interlinkages, we help prop up ASEAN to stay not as a proxy of any of the competing world powers.
Absolutely. And, like the Prime Minister has put it time and again, even when he visited, the Ukrainian president and in the United States as well at that official state visit, he said that, this is not an era of war. And that's how India has constantly been posturing itself as well. Many thanks for that pertinent, input over there. Ambassador Vora, the situation in Myanmar is going to be another hot topic. Ever since, the junta's coup recently, that is going to be another hot topic for sure. Now, when we're looking at Myanmar, what role can India essentially play? How do you think India is going to posture itself? Because inside the ASEAN countries as well, Indonesia has taken a different stand, Thailand has taken a different stand, and even as we're talking about this, China is coming up with a new, sort of like a bridge that is going to surpass some international maritime checkposts that's going to cross through the Thailand Gulf. All of that is taking shape. Myanmar, the ASEAN nations themselves, having a divided opinion, and how can India, play a role over here? Your opinion on that?
That's a very good question, and it's not easy to find an answer. Well, thank you for asking it. As far as China is concerned, just one issue about the map that they've recently published. If you go by that map, and incidentally, if you look at it carefully, even the moon is part of Greater China. So Chandrayaan-3 should get Chinese permission before landing there, according to the Chinese. The Chinese are not attending this, the ASEAN Plus Summit, so to speak, the ASEAN East Asia Summit. Because Dingling, whatever the fellow's name is, he's very scared that he'll be called out. He's not going for domestic reasons. We all know that. So he's very, very insecure in his own country. He's not going to move anywhere. Even if the ASEAN Plus Summit was being held, or the East Asia Summit was being held in Hong Kong, he would probably not leave Beijing. That's extremely important to remember. And now India has emerged as a counterweight. You've talked to Myanmar. How do you deal with a country which is a member of ASEAN? None of the ASEAN nations have at different times, even in their recent history, been perfect democracies. There's been a coup in Myanmar, yes, and ASEAN is saying, look, you guys better behave. There's been trouble in Cambodia. The ASEAN fellows have been saying, look, you don't do funny things like this. So how do you deal with Myanmar, which is our neighbor, which is effectively our bridge, our link over land to ASEAN? I believe we've taken the right approach. We are dealing with everybody. It's always been our policy that we don't make judgments that this is a good thing or a bad thing for the country. We deal with whichever government is in power. We deal with the people of that country. And we are doing precisely that in Myanmar. The role that India can play is by bringing to bear its moral influence and telling Myanmar, the regime, as we have been doing, that it's time to set your house in order. ASEAN would appreciate this role greatly. They do not trust the role of China at all in Myanmar. We all know what China has been up to, the kind of money they've given, the funny games they are playing. They do not trust the United States, which always comes with a big stick and says, it's my way or the highway. They trust India because they know that we will provide the healing touch, and particularly under Prime Minister Modi. When India's international stature has gone higher than the sun, they know that we will be able to play an effective role in gently nudging the present regime, the military junta in Yangon, to bring back to Myanmar the kind of system that the people of Myanmar deserve and that Asia deserves as far as Myanmar is concerned. So I believe we can play a role, a very positive role. ASEAN is aware of this. Myanmar will be discussed, and India will be asked to play whatever role it can, and a major role that we can in normalizing the situation there. Having said that, let me also just finally, make a very quick comment, sir, that ASEAN at one time, I think it was Dr. Mahathir, when I was posted in Malaysia, I was the Prime Minister, who had said that ASEAN is the fuselage, it's an aircraft, and China and India are the two wings. Today they've understood that the Chinese wing is totally unreliable. The American wing is here now, gone tomorrow. And if ASEAN really wants to move ahead with the present economic situation in Japan not being the best, once upon a time we talked the flying geese pattern. Japan was going ahead, South Korea behind it, and then the other ASEAN nations would follow. But today the realization is that we, ASEAN, have to look west. And when we look west, what we see is India, our most reliable partner.
Well, absolutely. That's a brilliant way of putting it. Before we, let go of Myanmar completely, one last question from Rabinder Sachdev as well. Everywhere in ASEAN, what we hear and, speak about is regional stability. These two words, regional stability. I mean, we're looking at Thailand's separate engagement with the military junta. We're looking at Indonesia's own advocacy and their own dialogue with the junta. There seems to be regional instability, and all that is being promoted is regional stability, from banners to flexis to internet websites. Everybody says ASEAN matters, regional stability on agenda, regional stability on the talks, on the cards. But essentially, what is really happening is a complete picture in contrast. Your viewpoint on that, sir? It seems like you'll have to unmute yourself, sir.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Thank you very much. Sorry. Yeah, certainly. You see, ASEAN, the composition of ASEAN includes developed nations from Singapore to a nation like Myanmar. So there's a wide disparity of the kinds of nations and their governance systems within ASEAN. And, it has countries which have been dictatorships, which are dictatorships, which are monarchy, semi-monarchy, monarchy, democracy. Look at Thailand, etc., Laos, Cambodia. So there is definitely a question of, stability in these countries. The reason being that if these countries are unstable, China is going to be making more and more headways. Okay, that's from our perspective also, right? Okay, from their own national perspective, they should be stable, each country, as they would say. But the point is that the more unstable any of these countries are, the more China can arm twist, make sweetheart deals on corruption, on the BRI, etc. Now, I'll step back again. I have a model which may be a fun for your viewers to see as to where and what is the world of today, if you can see it, right? The world of today is becoming a matrix, right? It's a matrix. Everybody is being interconnected and there are equations there. So if there is instability in a region near to us from our perspective, right, which gives openings to, forces which are, let's say, negative towards us, it does affect us also, and it affects our own stability also. So it's in the interest of the ASEAN nations themselves to have stability, and it's in the interest of friends of ASEAN and neighbors of ASEAN, let's say India, so that there be stability in the ASEAN countries. You were talking about Myanmar. Unfortunately, we see, with respect to Myanmar, nobody is playing any role. UN is doing virtually nothing from what little I know. The only little thing that is being attempted is by the ASEAN countries when they had a 5-point formula they had given to the Myanmar junta, wherein, first was that stop all violence, second was talk to the Aung San Suu team, etc. There are 5 points to that, right? Nobody else is talking or nudging Myanmar towards, a better tomorrow. And therein, yes, whatever role India is playing currently or whatever role India can play more would be okay, but India does not want to be overly going on an overdrive with respect to Myanmar because their sensitivity is out there, and it could be seen that India is playing that card because we want to, push off China, which we do, of course. So therefore, ASEAN is the only, grouping which is looking to address the question of Myanmar. Nobody else is. So stability is definitely a huge factor in this region.
Right, absolutely. So, moving a little bit forward, then those regional issues, even as these, big powers and rivalries are going to meet in this arena and talk about the South China Sea, China's growing, presence in the region, and of course, the Myanmar issue, which is another hot topic. Let's also talk about who all are going to be in attendance, gentlemen. Kamala Harris is representing the United States, not Joe Biden this time around. Li Qiang, I think, is representing Xi Jinping and China, because like Ambassador Vora put it, he's scared not coming out. Putin did not make his way for the BRICS summit as well. It was Mr. Lavrov over there as well, and it seems like Lavrov again over here as well. India on the high table, the global high table. The United States' official state visit, the Prime Minister getting the highest accords in Papua New Guinea and Fiji as well. What does it tell the world about India? India today, India's defense deals, India's defense ties with Emmanuel Macron. Prime Minister's coming back. He's taking a small, visit to Greece as well, getting a grand welcome over there as well. What does it tell the world about what India is today? I mean, that idea of a land of snake charmers and dancers, that's completely gone, hasn't it? The question to the both of you, whoever wants to come in.
No. Was it for Mr. Sajdev or for me?
Any one of you. Would you like to answer that, Mr. Vora?
All right, well, I'll be happy to answer that question. We are on a roll. India is unstoppable. So I'm in the United States. You've heard of a company called McKinsey and Company.
Right.
Very recently, this fellow said, the CEO, this is not India's decade, it's India's century. What are we doing as far as G20 is concerned? Some of the ASEAN countries will either be participating directly or as special invitees. We have proved that for the future of the world, it's the digital space, the digital economy, 500 million digital transactions every day, the digital public infrastructure that India has shown to the world that can be replicated. Sir, there have been several G20 summits. There have been several ASEAN summits. If I were to ask you, or you would know, Mr. Sajdev would know, but many others would not. What were the main issues discussed at Bali or the G20 summit before that or before that? Not many would remember. Not many would even be able to name any of the G20 leaders apart from Joe Biden or Ding Ling or Vladimir Putin and Narendra Modi. They would not. But as far as India is concerned, sir, it's important, very, very important to remember that the issues that India has raised will outlive India's presidency of the G20. We have set standards and we've introduced trends that others will find it hard to ignore. Brazil has even said they are going to be the next president, that it's going to be tough for us to replicate India's act. Now, that is the position that India occupies. As far as the G193, which is, you probably heard of this fossil with 193 members. It used to be called the United Nations. I'm in New York, so I don't even know if it's still alive. It's completely moribund. But G20, sir, something important to remember, which ASEAN also understands, that when it was formed, it was a Western construct, right? The G7 is the Brahmin club. They could not deal with the financial crisis of 2008, which was unleashed by America. So they asked the Kshatriyas to come in. We had the Kshatriya club, which is the G20. But then that too, for some time, was not seen as very effective. So we had the Baghi, the rebel club, which is BRICS, the Eentwalas, as I call them. We have these three movements. On the one hand, the Western bloc, which still survived, G7. Then we have BRICS, which is the developing countries. And we have G20, which is the bridge between the two. This is the role that India is playing. This is the importance of it.
I mean, I really like those analogies. I'm trying to understand where really Kurukshetra here is in all of this. Rabindra Sachdev, just to build up on that, your viewpoint on India's rising stature on the high table as well. One important point certainly that Ambassador Vora put out is that the issues that we're setting out for the world to conquer are going to far outlive India's G20 presidency. Vasudeva Kutumbakam. That's the theme this time around in G20. And, critics will quickly come out and say that, the Prime Minister is usually on his jaunts outside and it's a trip and they're usually vacations and God knows what all. This is a packed schedule, isn't it? It's a back-to-back diplomatic meetings outside. You've got BRICS on the back, flying back. He stops by in Greece. Now he's gone to, Jakarta. He's going to fly out tonight. He's going to come back tomorrow and it's game on G20 again.
Thank you so much. Oh, absolutely. I mean, little bigger context, if I may. You see, the way I read, and I've been talking about it very often, post 2020, post COVID, post the Russia-Ukraine war, which is still ongoing, and America-China tensions, where the war is about who will be the #1 empire, the China-America, that's the contest out there. These three things when combined, if you look, the world is entering into a new era, complete new era. Before 2020, the world order, whatever we may say, was whatever. But post 2020, this era is a complete new era. In this era, it's not a new world order, because an order implies things are set and fixed. It's a matrix. And that's the model I showed you a few minutes ago. The world is now entering into a new world matrix. The world is under reconstruction. It's like you switch off a computer and then you reboot. The world is right now rebooting. And in this rebooting, restarting of the world, every nation is fast and furious trying to make deals or figure out their situation, their partnerships, their own core interests. Where do they fit in this matrix? That is what's happening. Now, in this under construction matrix, the issues that India has brought up are absolutely fundamental. And these are the logical issues, quote unquote, the term used, global south. Okay, and by the way, you refer to Papua New Guinea. The importance of Papua New Guinea, I'll say, and Prime Minister's visit there was that those 14 island nations, in writing, they said to India that Prime Minister Modi take up our issues as the global south. I mean, in writing, they said, and then I think the momentum of global south has picked up even more after that, the whole discussions on that. So, so these are the situations which are out there right now, and the issues which India brings forth. And as you mentioned, Vasudev Kutumbakam, I slightly bet, sorry, that Vasudev Kutumbakam may be a step too far. The first step that the world needs is to learn to coexist, to live and let live, right? Let's learn to live and let live, and then, okay, let's be a family. So these are the fundamental values that India brings forth. And okay, Biden, when he's coming to G20, his statement a few days ago was that I'm going to the G20 to reaffirm our commitment to the G20. As Ambassador Vora was saying, the G7, the Brahmins Club. The Brahmins Club, or the rich, is realizing that the issues which are being brought forth by the G20 and further down the pyramid, right, as the global south, are the most important issues in the world of today. Because if these issues are not addressed, maybe the top of the pyramid would be left hanging. The bottom of the pyramid and middle of the pyramid would completely shift away, leaving the north, the global north, just hanging and with less power, with less economic might, etc. So the leading nations of the north realize, of course, the century is of Asia's, because here the populations are here, economic growths are here, and shortly soon it will be Africa also, because Africa is a huge, again, continent and people and resources which have been exploited. So I think India's leadership at this point of time is needed. One, we are giving it. Two, and we are carrying great momentum on it, because you see, India, where we come with the grace of God and our legacy as a civilization, as a people, we come with ideas of, let's say, Buddha, middle path, Gandhi, Tagore, Swami Vivekananda. Right now, no world leader is talking about anything along these lines. No leader is talking about good, positive ideals of coexistence amongst humanity, amongst nations, and between man and Mother Nature. If you do not let Mother Nature live, climate change, Mother Nature is not going to let us live, right? So India is coalescing as, the core elements of human existence on this planet, the issues which are to be addressed.
Absolutely, sir. I mean, you spoke about, climate change and extreme weather events. We're already seeing what's happening in our own country. It's not just us. Take a look at what's happening in Turkey very recently. Erdogan, even though, that unprecedented tenure again for Erdogan, even after those devastating earthquakes. And, the price rise is the highest in 6 years in, Turkey. talking about what you're also pointing out, the Prime Minister's role, back-to-back packed schedules, you spoke about Vasudev Kutumbakam being a step little bit far too ahead. And, I saw Ambassador Vora wanted to come in there. Ambassador Vora, what's your opinion on that?
With total respect for Mr. Sachdev, this nonsense of live and let live is a very defeatist approach. It means that we will live provided China lets us live. No, sir, it doesn't happen. The reality today is that we have to exist in a world as equals, and we are doing that. Now, the relationship with ASEAN, there's a particular country you might have heard of it called the Philippines. They have major issues with China. There was a time when the boxer president, I know him well, Rodrigo Duterte, had said about ping pong that, oh, I love this man. And now, of course, they hate each other. Duterte is no longer president. But what happened? India intervened, India came in and sold them that little thing called the BrahMos missile. Vietnam is also talking about it. So it's not just in maritime security, but in defense also. The India-ASEAN relationship has assumed a new dimension. I'm told Malaysia is also expressing interest in weaponry and in armaments in defense cooperation with India at a bilateral level. We're not selling the BrahMos missiles to all of ASEAN. We're selling it to individual countries. Having said this, sir, India's role today in the world as the fourth largest economy in the world, we've already reached there. The 5 critical issues for mankind. Number one is health because of the Chinese virus. We've seen what happened. Number 2 is climate change. We're seeing what's happening in China today with floods and drought and whatever. The third issue will be economic recovery through free and open seas. China, of course, says that its great-grandfather drowned in all the oceans of the world, so all the oceans belong to it. The fourth is new critical emerging technologies. The fifth is terrorism. Each of these issues impacts ASEAN. Each of these issues impacts every country in the world. And after the virtual Global South Summit with 125 countries participating that Prime Minister Narendra Modi hosted, sir, nobody ever listened. I'm privileged to be special advisor to 3 African countries. You have, but many of your millions of viewers haven't even heard their names. Guinea-Bissau or the Kingdom of Lesotho or South Sudan, you may have heard of it.
Right.
All 3 participated. We said we will bring your voice to the world. Your voice has reached New York, where the United Nations is, but it's not heard. It's not listened to. We will be your ambassador. And all 3 countries, sir, and I say this with tremendous pride, called me since I'm special advisor, some of their senior officials, some of their ministers, and said, Mr. Ambassador, thank you for raising our voice. We thank India, and we have chosen India as our most reliable partner. India is our choice as a developmental model, role model. To which my response always is, yahi hai right choice, baby. India will never let you down.
All right then, Ambassador Vora. Even as we're talking about all of this, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he was there. He's spoken about a strategic partnership which is of extreme significance to Canada. And not just that, Australian, leader Anthony Albanese, he's put in a new strategic framework as well. Let's listen into what the Australian Prime Minister had to say, and then we'll break apart that particular reaction as well. Listen in.
Today I announce we have committed $95.4 million to support 3 initiatives that go to the heart of the strategy's priorities. We'll form new deal teams based in Southeast Asia and drawing on public and private sector expertise to identify opportunities for Australian investors and support projects through to finalisation. We'll also embark on a new Southeast Asia Business Exchange program to boost two-way trade. This will improve awareness of trade opportunities both in Australia and in Southeast Asia.
Well, so what do you make of that, Rabindra Sachdev? A new tranche of money that now Australia has again promised to the tune of some 90 million, Australian dollars, 95.4 million Australian dollars to be precise, to strengthen Australia's own ties with ASEAN. So, like Ambassador Vora was talking about, that, the top of the pyramid, no, actually it was you, the top of the pyramid is not going to levitate on its own, which is why there is, again and again, these top nations are coming and reassuring their contribution to these other lower rung of the pyramid. What's your viewpoint on Australian Prime Ministers announcing this new Southeast Asia trade strategy?
No, thank you so much. You see, I mean, specific to Australia, if we go to talk, you see, Australia is in the mind. It has huge trade with China, right? And given the worsening relations between China and Australia, where does Australia go? It has to find out newer markets or newer investors or newer whatsoever, right? That's one set. Secondly, with respect to India, you see, I mean, there's a saying, of course, everybody salutes the rising sun. India is rising today. Everybody is saluting us. Why is France so enamored with India? We've given France business of, I don't know how many, approximately maybe 90 billion odd dollars in the last 1 or 2 years. Our Rafales of about 10 odd billion dollars, our purchase Air India or Indigo, whichever of Airbus planes. India has given business of worth over 90 billion dollars to France in the last couple of years. How much business has France given India, by the way? Okay, so the point is, we are a growing economy, large number of people. So, I mean, countries would gravitate towards us. That is a nature. That is the natural law. I'll quickly segue to one point which Ambassador Vora mentioned with all due respect and will come back. You see, when I said that Vasudev Kutumbakam is a step too far and live and let live is a better first step, I don't mean that you just play back and let the other kill you. Right? Live and let live. Otherwise, we will do whatever we need to do to live ourselves. And secondly, when we say, the world is a family, tell me, has history not given us zillions of examples of father killing son, children killing parents? Don't families have killings amongst each other? So, and even within a family has to learn to live and let live amongst themselves. With father, mother, parent, child, rebellious teenager, father scores, the child runs away or not. We have to learn to coexist. That is the first step the world has to graduate to. Beyond that, yes, if we can be a family, but I don't see, history is full of, kings and queens killing each other, their children, putting their parents in prison. And also, so these are analogies definitely positive in the spirit, we should, hope for, aim for. Now back to this aspect of, so Australia is in the mind. So even the US companies, US companies, if they are slowly starting to move out of China, where do they go? For two things. One, for their production base, and second, for their markets. India, Japan, Japanese companies, due to geopolitical tensions, if Japanese business is going to suffer in China, where do they go? India, next. But by the way, we have a huge competition here with ASEAN. The supply chains that we are talking, relocating from China, coming to India. I'll give an example. The last 5 years, the number of Japanese companies which have come to India is -1 or +1 only. India had about 1,455 Japanese companies about 5 years ago. About 3 or 4 wound up shop for whatever reasons, and 4 or 5 new have come. So it's a net only positive of 1. Vietnam is beating India to attracting manufacturing relocations.
No.
Malaysia is beating India. But yes, sir, numbers are there. We can discuss. Let me complete my point. You have your own, views, certainly, yes. So, we are increasing our ease of doing business and situations, and numbers will grow coming to India. But these are facts. The number of Japanese companies in India has grown only by 1 in the last 5 years. Japanese ambassador said it in a speech 6 months ago.
All right. I do concede that, when we're talking about Rabindranath Tagore, Swami Vivekananda, when we're talking about Mahatma Gandhi, the live and let live principle does come a little bit, up on the top. And jab umeed pe duniya kayam hai, to why not, have a little bit more faith and belief on live and let live principle and idea. Of course, Vasudev Kutumbakam, again, is something that people are also talking about. It's a great theme, one nation, one family, one future. That's a great idea as well. The media, the middle path, the mediocrity between these two themes, I think will work out, best. But, Rabindra Sachdev, Ambassador Vora, spoke about markets. Is it all about markets? We're talking about regional stability, but by the end of it, it's all trade agreements and money. Is it all about vitamin M and the deficiency and more and lack of it? Is that the bottom line everywhere? In the garb of regional stability and diplomacy, the essential idea is capitalism. Is it?
Again, is that meant for me or for Mr.
Yes, absolutely.
Satyav? I'm
For
not
you,
quite-
for you, for you.
All right. May I remind you, sir, you heard of a fellow, partly from the Punjab, called Billu Bhai Clinton. He used to be president of the United States, and when he was contesting, I call him Billu Bhai. When he was contesting elections, he was asked, why should we vote for you and not for George Bush, the then incumbent president in the 1990s of the United States? And his classic answer, it's the economy, stupid. Ultimately, we are economic creatures. We look for markets, we look for vitamin M, as you so eloquently put it. We look for our future based on trade. And by all these counts, sir, the future begins with an I, not with an F. And beginning with I, it's India. The world is looking to us. Now, whether 5 Japanese companies come in or 2.5 come in or 9.25 come in, and whether they go to Vietnam or they go here, there, everywhere, we're not talking about that. We're looking at the quality of investments. We're looking at the future. We're looking at the level of confidence. As far as that is concerned, sir, India today is #1. We're right up there. I'm in the United States. Many members of the Indian community, and I go for my morning walks. I will, in about 5 hours, be joining a group of people. We have lots of intellectuals who are part of this group that we walk together. They all tell me that this time it's India. There's just one word, and whether it's yoga or whatever, there are companies that have made their fortunes by promoting Indian ideology, Indian concepts, Indian culture in the United States. And as my son, in whose apartment I live, says, this is the best time to be an Indian in the United States.
Well, absolutely. You know, I think you've said it. It is a best time to be an Indian if you're in the West, but what about being an Indian in the East as well? That's also going to be our focus. It seems like we've wrapped up this discussion pretty nicely, even as the Prime Minister is going to embark on his journey very soon. I really loved the the Brahmin and the Kshatriya analogy, and some crucial points that Rabinder Sachdev also put out. Many thanks, gentlemen, for joining us here with your insightful inputs. We'll come back for more when the Prime Minister certainly returns from his own trip from Indonesia. That's all the time we have for you. This is Kabir Naqvi signing off. All eyes on ASEAN. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Keep watching News9 Live.
तो जो 9 मुद्दे का जिक्र किया गया है इस चिट्ठी में, सोनिया गांधी जी की चिट्ठी में, मैं आपको मोटे तौर से गिना लूँगा और ये जो आपको खत मिल जाएगा, आपको इस पर और जानकारी मिल जाएगी। पहला मुद्दा है जो मौजूदा